Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is Phantasm Ravager. Now, Ravager came out in 2016, and this is the fifth and final film in the Phantasm series. Now, I've already reviewed the first four Phantasm movies a while back, so you could go check out those reviews if you want. Now, the film was tragically the final film of Angus Scrimm, whose real name was Rory Guy. Now, Angus Scrimm played the Tall Man, the main villain of this series, throughout all five films, and he died early in 2016, and he's definitely gonna be missed. Now, I'm a huge fan of the Phantasm series. I have been since I was 14 years old. Now, before I get on to this review, I just want to give a little recap of the first four films. Now, the Phantasm series started in 1979 with the film Phantasm, which was written and directed by Don Coscarelli. Now, Phantasm was about these two brothers named Mike and Jody who discover that the mortician in their town is actually an alien who they later call the Tall Man, and it turns out that the Tall Man is bringing all the dead bodies at the funeral home back from the dead as these zombie dwarfs, and he's shipping them off to his planet to be slaves on his planet. And in the film, Mike, Jody, and their friend Reggie have to stop the Tall Man. That's the basic plotline of the first Phantasm movie in a nutshell. Now, I adore the first Phantasm movie. It's one of my all-time favorite horror films, and I first saw it when I was 14 years old, and I remember when I first saw this movie, I was just blown the fuck away by it. It's a film that I've always enjoyed, and it's a film that's honestly become kind of close to my heart, honestly. It's one of my all-time favorite, not just horror films, but films in general. And the first Phantasm movie has such a surreal, dreamlike quality about it, and there's a lot of aspects of that movie where you're not sure how much of it is real and how much of it is a dream. And the film's also kind of a coming-of-age story as well, and it's just a fantastic movie, and it can be interpreted on several different levels, and even though I do enjoy most of the sequels, I do almost feel like the film is almost hurt by having sequels, because the first Phantasm movie really is almost perfect on its own, and it's a film that really didn't need sequels, even though I do enjoy most of the sequels that were made to it. Now, years after the first Phantasm movie, Don Coscarelli would follow it up with a series of sequels. Now, the sequels went in a slightly different direction than the first movie. The sequels became much more action-oriented. Now, even though the sequels are nowhere near as good as the first movie, I still enjoy the sequels a lot. Now, the Phantasm sequels follow Mike and Reggie traveling across the country, trying to hunt down and destroy the Tall Man. Now, as the series goes on, it's revealed what the Tall Man's actual agenda is. It turns out the Tall Man actually wants to bring about the end of the world as we know it, and it's also revealed throughout the series that the Tall Man is actually trying to turn Mike into the same type of creature that he is. But yeah, the first four Phantasm movies are awesome. I'm a huge fan of the Phantasm series in general, and to me, the Phantasm series has so much imagination to it. You have aliens, you have zombies, you have demons, you have time travel, you have alternate universes, and it's such a fun series, and the series has a good mix between horror, sci-fi, fantasy, comedy, and drama, and it's just a fantastic series overall, and I can't say the films are flawless, but I love the first four Phantasm movies, warts and all. Now, Phantasm 4 Oblivion, which came out in 1998, ended on a huge cliffhanger, and for years that was the final film in this series. So, this movie, Phantasm 5, is a film that has really been anticipated by horror fans for years now. Now, originally, Phantasm 5 was going to come out right after Phantasm 4, and it was going to be a post-apocalyptic movie where the Toll Man has destroyed the human race, and it follows groups of survivors trying to hunt down and destroy the Toll Man, and it was going to be like this big post-apocalyptic epic, and Bruce Campbell was actually going to be in it, and it was going to be written and directed by Roger Avary. Now, unfortunately, this Phantasm 5 movie that Roger Avary was going to do never happened. I guess they couldn't get funding for it or something, but it never happened, and for years there have been rumors that there might be a Phantasm 5, but the cast of the Phantasm series kind of shot that down, so for years it seemed like a Phantasm 5 was never going to happen. But then in 2014, it was announced that Phantasm 5 was shot already, and they released the teaser trailer for this movie, and I remember just being so excited when I heard that. Then I saw the teaser trailer, and I noticed some of the really bad CGI effects that were in the trailer, and that kind of brought my excitement down. I was still excited to see the movie, but I went into this film with realistic expectations, and then the release date kept getting postponed. Like, originally I heard this was going to be released in 2015, but then it got postponed again, and it wasn't released until late 2016, and this was already well after Angus Scrimm unfortunately died. Now, this was released in October of 2016, and it was released on DVD and Blu-ray, and I think it also got a limited theatrical run as well. Now, the Phantasm 5 that we got was co-written and produced by Don Coscarelli, and it was co-written and directed by David Hartman, and this does use some elements from Roger Avary's original script for Phantasm 5. Now, this film was originally going to be a web series that David Hartman was making that was set in the Phantasm universe, but he ended up making it into a full-length movie. Now, what did I think of Phantasm Ravager? As I said before, I went into this with realistic expectations, and even before I saw this, I already heard a lot of really mixed things about this. And the movie as a whole, I would say I did enjoy this movie, but I think the only reason I enjoyed it is because I'm such a big fan of this series, and it was nice to see these characters again. But this film did have a lot of problems, and I will say that overall, this is definitely my least favorite film in the entire series. Now, the plot of Phantasm Ravager is it picks up right where Phantasm 4 left off. Reggie gets separated from Mike, and in the beginning of this movie, Reggie is wandering through the desert looking for Mike and the Toll Man. But in the movie, one thing leads to another, and eventually in the film, Reggie actually wakes up in this old abandoned hospital, or what appears to be like an old abandoned hospital, and it turns out that he is actually woken up 10 years into the future, and he wakes up in a post-apocalyptic future where the Toll Man has actually destroyed the human race. Like, it turns out that the Toll Man has spread an alien virus across the planet, and this virus destroyed most of the Earth's population, and then the Toll Man started this massive invasion of Earth, and he's trying to exterminate all the remaining humans. So Reggie eventually meets Mike in this post-apocalyptic future, and he finds out that Mike is actually part of this human resistance against the Toll Man. So the movie starts following Reggie in this post-apocalyptic future, but then suddenly Reggie wakes up in a nursing home, and in this nursing home he's just some senile old man, and it appears that the world is fine. Like, it appears that the Toll Man man never destroyed the world, and it appears that Reggie was just crazy this whole time, and he meets, like, Mike in this, like, what appears to be some kind of alternate reality, and essentially throughout the whole film, Reggie's being pulled back and forth between these two different realities. One reality where the tall man destroyed the human race, and another reality where it appears that the tall man never existed, and this was all in Reggie's head. And you see Reggie get pulled back and forth between these two different realities, and you're not sure which one is reality and which one is a dream, or are they both real and they're just two different alternate universes that Reggie, once again, is being pulled back and forth between. So that's the basic plotline of Phantasm Ravager. It's like this post-apocalyptic alien invasion movie slash alternate reality film. Now, I will say that I liked the story for this movie. I did like the overall story for the film, and once again, it was great to see these characters again. Like, it was great to see Angus Scrimm once again play the tall man, and he did do a great job in this film. It was great to see Reggie Bannister once again reprise his role as the character of Reggie, and he did a really good job, both as the Reggie that we know from the Phantasm universe, and then this like senile Reggie that you see in this alternate universe. And A. Michael Baldwin once again reprises his role as Mike, and he does do a really good job as the Mike that we know from the Phantasm universe, and then the alternate universe version of Mike is also really good, and he does a really good job as this alternate reality Mike. So once again, I thought the story was interesting, and it was great to see these characters again. I also really liked some of the dialogue between Reggie and the tall man in this movie. Like, there's a certain scene in this movie where the tall man is actually offering Reggie a second shot at life. Like, in Phantasm 2, you find out that Reggie has a family, and the tall man kills Reggie's family right in the beginning of Phantasm 2, but in this movie, there's a scene where the tall man is offering to bring Reggie's family back, because the tall man is a being that can manipulate reality, so he's offering to bring Reggie's family back and give Reggie a second shot at life, but Reggie refuses because he knows that even if the tall man does make good on his promise, he knows that will be a betrayal to Mike. And when Reggie refuses because he knows that will be betraying Mike, the tall man genuinely doesn't understand. Like, the tall man doesn't understand concepts like friendship and loyalty. And the scene where the tall man is trying to offer Reggie a second shot at life is very similar to the story from the Bible of the devil trying to get Jesus to worship him instead of God. Now, I'm not sure if this particular scene from the movie was inspired by that story from the Bible, but it was just kind of an interesting parallel. Now, once again, story-wise and characters-wise, I did enjoy this movie, but on a technical level, I had a lot of issues with this film. Now, this film had an extremely low budget, and you could tell. Now, to be fair, the Phantasm series has always been kind of a low-budget series. I mean, the first 4 films were low-budget as well, and I'm not sure if this is because maybe Don Coscarelli is a better filmmaker than David Hartman, but I feel like even though the first 4 Phantasm movies were low-budget, they still looked really good though, and you almost couldn't tell that they were so low-budget. With the exception of maybe the first one. The first one, you could kind of tell that had a low budget, but you could forgive that because that was a low-budget film from, like, the late 70s. With this, though, you could tell it has a low budget, and there's a lot of really bad CGI effects in this movie and green screen effects. Like, there's a lot of scenes in this movie where it's so obviously CGI and green screen effects, and I know this was a low-budget film, and the story for this movie kind of requires a big budget, though, because parts of this movie are a post-apocalyptic film, and this kind of in my opinion, this required a much bigger budget than it actually had. And it's kind of a surprise to me that this film couldn't get a bigger budget, because the Phantasm series is a pretty beloved series by a lot of horror fans, so I'm surprised that they couldn't get enough funding to make the film look a little bit better. And once again, that's my biggest issue with this movie, is the special effects. And the special effects really do kind of bring this movie down in a way where they really shouldn't, honestly, because I do enjoy the story for this movie, and it's great seeing like Mike and Reggie and the tall man again in a movie, but once again, just the effects in the film are really kind of laughable in certain parts. Another issue I had with this movie is the ending. Now, before I saw this movie, I heard that this film was going to, like, wrap everything up, and it was going to officially be the final chapter in this series, and it was going to tie up all the loose ends in the series, and it really didn't. Like, the way the movie ends, it doesn't wrap anything up or anything like that, and I don't want to give away the ending, but once again, it doesn't tie up any loose ends. Like, the film ends where you could easily make more sequels. Now, unfortunately, since Angus Scrimm is no longer with us, there, in all likelihood, would be no more sequels unless they get somebody else to play the Toll Man, which I really don't see them doing. Now, the only logical place I can see them taking this series is in comic book form, and I can actually see them doing that, like a comic book series or a graphic novel that picks up where this movie left off. Like, that's really the only way you can make another sequel without actually making a movie, because, once again, the Toll Man's, Angus Scrimm is no longer with us, so you can't make another Phantasm movie with him in it, so it seems like the only logical place to go is either a graphic novel or a comic book series that picks up where this film left off, and truth be told, I would actually really like to see that, because this film still leaves a lot of loose ends, and I would really like to see them do something that kind of like, at least finishes off the story officially, but obviously they can't do another movie, so if they did like a graphic novel or a comic book series, you bet your ass I would buy that. Like, I would love to see what happens after this. But once again, I had a lot of mixed feelings on this movie, but I would say that I still enjoyed it for the most part, but I think my enjoyment of this movie really just came from the fact that I've already known these characters for so long, and I'm such a huge fan of this series that it was great to see the characters again, and I think that's the only reason I really enjoyed it. But if you're a fan of this series, I do recommend it, and you might really enjoy it as well. Now, if you're not a fan of the Phantasm series, then you're definitely not going to enjoy this, because this is a film that most definitely was made for the fans. But yeah, that's my review on Phantasm Ravager, and bye.